12-year-old Stian Jepperson has autism, a disability of the central nervous system that affects the way he communicates and relates to people in the world around him. Stian's parents, Steve, an artist, and mum, Parul, are desperate to know more about their son's autism. Since it was first classified as a disorder in 1943, scientists have been striving to unravel this mysterious neurological condition. So Steve and Parul are going on a journey to find out what the country's top scientists can tell them about Stian's disability and whether there's anything that can be done to help him. Up to the age of 2, Stian seemed to be developing like any other child his age.
This is a video of when he was talking, and just a normal 2-year-old boy.
How old are you?
Just over a year after this video, Stian suddenly stopped speaking.
I really miss his voice. He was talking, you know, that he was actually saying and speaking. And here he's coming back into the kitchen and it's his lollipop. Those few sentences of his just ring around in my head very often. And quite often, just this odd word or the phrase will come to my mind about the things he used to say. And I think I just miss Stian. You know, I know he's here, but I really do, I miss him.
As well as losing his speech, Stian also began bedwetting, developing facial tics, behaving disruptively, and becoming increasingly withdrawn.
It was a kind of change, a sort of, I don't know if you say degeneration, but it was kind of a different boy.
Yeah, he became really, really agitated and, I mean, he started doing strange things because they weren't normal to his behaviour before.
His gaze changed as well. I mean, his gaze became a kind of a blank gaze rather than a gaze that connected with.
Yeah, it didn't start, well, there was a shutdown and it was as though he couldn't hear you.
After a year and a half, Stian was diagnosed with regressive autism, one of a range of disorders that are part of what's called the autistic spectrum. It's thought that over 100,000 British children have an autistic spectrum disorder. Although degrees of disability vary greatly, all autistic children have differences in their brains causing difficulty in 3 main areas: social interaction, communication, and imagination. They may also have a resistance to changes in routine and will often display repetitive behaviour patterns.
When he found this little clip, he'll watch it again and again. He'll go to a bit that he likes and then just watch that bit over and over again. So yeah, that's part of the repetitive behaviour.
Having been in a situation where you've got lovely children, lovely wife,
Everything's going well.
Everything's going well, then boom, that happened, you know, and your life's turned upside down.
Over the next few weeks, Steve and Parul will be meeting some of the UK's leading scientists who are trying to solve the puzzle of autism.
It's like this feeling that there must be a key somewhere to unlock and let Stian out, you know, so that he can be himself again. But there must be somebody out there who can actually help us to help him.
We are so anxious to find explanations for what in many ways is something we don't understand at all, isn't it?
There are many theories about what causes autism. Some experts think that changes to the brain are caused by external factors, such as diet, environmental toxins, antibiotics or vaccines. Others believe that it is a psychiatric disorder.
We thought that it was actually some sort of trauma that he's had in his life that caused the autism, or stopped him from, or triggered the autism.
Stian had a fall just before he stopped talking. He had a course of antibiotics following an infection. So that was another possibility.
Thinking that maybe it was something that we changed in his diet, something that he ate or drank. So there was a whole load of different things that we looked at.
Although there could be many factors involved in autism, scientists in Oxford are trying to get to the root of the problem. Professor Anthony Monaco is leading a multi-million-pound study into the role genes play in autism.
What we're trying to understand is, in the research arena, is what are the causes of autism. And most of the work has been done by looking at how it runs in families, and also looking at identical twins and non-identical twins. And that has all pointed to a very strong genetic cause to autism.
Really?
But it's not the usual genetics that most of us are used to hearing about, like cystic fibrosis or muscular dystrophy, where there's a one-to-one relationship between a gene that has a mutation and then a disorder that comes out of that. With autism, we don't really understand it completely, but it seems to be very complex. It's definitely more than one gene involved. So this is the bay where our autism team works.
Professor Monaco and his team are part of the Autism Genome Project, an international study that's examining the DNA of nearly 3,000 families affected by the disorder. They're looking for the genes that make someone susceptible to developing autism. But genetics might not be the whole story.
Would there be a trigger, an environmental trigger or an emotional trigger or something that would cause the genetic makeup to
come out that way? Yeah, that's a very good question. We're not sure whether it's actually an environmental trigger as we think of things that happen after the baby is born, whether is it the complexity of the way the brain develops and or environmental influences as we think of them as a stressful situation or, a toxin. That's what the problem is. We don't know. The whole idea of what in the environment or in the development of the brain is contributing on top of the genetics is another area of investigation that we'll do in the future. But for now, we're trying to focus on the genetics.
Professor Monaco believes the first step in finding out what triggers autism is to identify the genes responsible for making someone susceptible to the condition. The team has already found some of the genes involved, but the wide range of disorders in the autistic spectrum has presented them with a challenge.
Are we looking necessarily at one condition that we can identify as autism, or there?
No, I think this is you've hit the nail on the head. One of our problems is we now realize that there's probably many different types, and each of them may have their own genetic and complex genetic causes. So what we found so far are genes which each may contribute to 1 or 2% of cases. So we could end up with hundreds of genes involved.
Luckily for the scientists, new technology is enabling them to speed up the process of analysing the huge numbers of genes involved. State-of-the-art automated machines and powerful computers can examine millions of sections of DNA hundreds of thousands of times quicker and more efficiently than ever before.
We're hoping by the end of 2008, early 2009, we should have results which can tell us at very high resolution where we think the genes for autism may lie in this study.
Well,
the
so
technology
exciting.
is now there
Yeah.
that we should be able to achieve what we wanted to do over the last 10 years.
Fantastic.
I think that if there is a conclusive reason for the autism, genetic or environmental or to do with diet, it would be really helpful to parents to have
Look at this peace of mind.
Peace of mind.
I do feel actually very positive because I think, this is great stuff. This is really very important stuff that's happening.
Steve trained as an artist, and his current project is to document his children. 23-year-old Kate, 9-year-old Freya, and of course, Stian.
You can't really set up and control. I mean, you've got to follow Stian, and he very much directs where you're able to steady your gaze. Sometimes he'll lock himself off, go into his bedroom and just sit very, very quietly. And you just get this gaze, and the gaze is almost an inward gaze. And so that was quite an opportunity, really, just to spend a bit of time just looking at that expression and trying to examine what he was perhaps feeling. This came about, I mean, essentially it was this drawing, but I wasn't happy with the eye, so I tore it up, and as I was tearing it up, I thought, I can't tear up a picture of my son. I sort of thought this is a horrible thing. I was looking at this torn up son. So I put it together with this image of Perrault. This is after 3 hours of getting Stian eventually to sleep. She was so tired, but you know, her tiredness and all of her thinking is continually about Stian and the family. I can't at the moment see where these will go. There's no pressure, and it's just it's nice therapy. That's it.
A few studies have shown that the brains of autistic people are larger and heavier than average, pointing to a neurological basis for the disorder.
I'd like to find out whether there is a neurological condition which contributes or is autism. It's hard to know because there doesn't seem to be at the moment a definition of the cause of autism.
We've tried to do everything we can to sort of help Stian, but without a good, full understanding, it's a really difficult thing to... Being in the dark, I think it's the difficulty, not really knowing what the problem is.
Steve and Perrault are heading back to Oxford, and this time they're bringing Freya and Stian to see the first brain imaging centre in the world, purpose-built to study autism. It's so new it hasn't been used yet, but Professor Anthony Bailey is giving the family a sneak preview of a special scanner that can open a window onto the autistic brain. Set in a magnetically shielded room, the scanner can detect tiny signals produced by brain activity.
We're trying to understand the ways in which the brain of people with autism spectrum disorders is working and the way that differs from the rest of the population. The reason we've chosen this type of scanner for studying autism is because it's silent, it's completely passive. The scanner does nothing active, it simply measures what's happening. It's very comfortable, and we can stay in there with people whilst they're having a scan.
The scanner will initially be used for children from 7 years old. But what Professor Bailey is keen to find out is whether someone as young as Stian can be persuaded to sit still for several minutes and watch images flashing on the screen in front of him. Stian doesn't last quite long enough in the scanner, but it's a good start. Professor Bailey plans to scan the brains of hundreds of children and adults with autism to see which areas of the brain are most active when they are looking at pictures or listening to stories. With his results, he'll be able to build up a groundbreaking picture of how the brains of autistic people work.
Is there something different that one would find with the picture that emerges from this, from an autistic brain, if you like, rather than from a...
So what we believe is that people with autism spectrum disorders have brains that work in a slightly different way from yours and mine. For many years, people thought that autism might be due to an abnormality in a localised part of the brain, but we've gradually moved away from that sort of model to thinking that maybe the brain is generally organised in a slightly different way, and that for some things that people do, that difference in organisation doesn't matter, and for other things it's absolutely critical. And that means that providing we use the right sort of task, we ought to be able to demonstrate the difference in the mechanism which the brain is using.
It was interesting to find out that an autistic person has a different brain to a neurotypical developing brain.
Obviously, Stian's still a little bit young and a little bit too excited to sit and have the scan done as yet, but we're looking forward, hopefully, to being able to get a picture of how his brain operates in some point in the future, which must make a great deal of difference to how we can help him with his situation.
Back at home, and Steve has been inspired to draw a cartoon of the visit to the scanner.
The image I'm trying to get is just this little boy stuck in this sort of billion-pound piece of equipment, stuff that's been developed with great care and great expense. And as far as he's concerned, it's just you know, it's like he's sitting up on a big pile of pillows and playing peepos from underneath the scanner. And I want to try and get how funny that was to watch and how much he enjoyed being the centre of attention. The thing is to get it, and if you can get that image, then that was such a lovely moment.
While scientists are still struggling to understand the causes and nature of autism, the number of therapies and interventions continues to grow.
There are lots of things out there, and I don't know how many of them are tested and what really works. Things like speech therapy, occupational therapy, music therapy, dolphin therapy.
And if you tried to do them all, I mean, it would just overload Sian's life, wouldn't it?
Not just that, but it would be this thing of introducing so many different people who would actually help you to carry out these therapies. Also, on top of that, a lot of them are really, really expensive.
There are drugs being used to treat some of the symptoms of autism, but as yet no one's come up with a cure. At Cambridge University, they're working on a radical new idea for treatment, using what's been called the cuddle chemical, oxytocin.
Oxytocin is a hormone that's present in all human beings and other mammals as well. And it's thought to be a really social hormone. In humans, it's a hormone that's related to things like trust. So if you increase oxytocin levels, you tend to trust and interact with people. It decreases social inhibition and fear.
So where would you find oxytocin in the body?
It's a hormone that you're continually secreting. It's in the blood.
One of the key characteristics of autism is difficulty with social interaction. It's also been found that autistic people have less oxytocin in their blood. So Jennifer wants to give this socialising hormone to people with autism to see if it improves the way they respond to the world. She'll measure this by tracking their responses to film clips.
We've got a camera here, and you can focus it on an individual's eye. And once you get it focused on the eye, it'll tell us wherever on the screen they're looking. So, you know, when you're watching a movie, individuals with autism often don't pay as much attention to the people's eyes, the important parts of the face for the emotional content when they look at movies. And one question we're really interested in asking is, will oxytocin change this?
So why should, as parents, we be excited about this project?
If the results come, if it increases looks to faces, if it increases your abilities to read emotions, does it change what they're paying attention to, and does it change what they're getting out of it? Because if it does, then the way you watch movies is really similar to the way you watch other people in real life. You know, if we have these results, this is going to get a lot of interest in this hormone and get a lot more people working on it, so that maybe someday there could be an actual chemical oxytocin treatment.
If, say, at some point there was a magic pill that you could take, and as long as you took that magic pill, you would be neurotypical or normal or whatever. I'd be quite worried about that if once the pill wore off, you know, the sort of fairy dust disappeared and you went back to the autism. I don't think at the moment there would be any question that we would want Stian to be taking an experimental medication.
Back in London, Steve and Perul are working on ways to help Stian interact with them. Not with drugs, but by introducing him to a new way of communicating.
Say more. More. You want more? Good boy.
You said more.
Yeah. One more. He's taken up signing, so he'll you know, we can communicate through sign language. To a certain extent, but sufficient for him to understand that we understand and there is dialogue.
There is some dialogue going on. More. Okay. You want more? Come on in. More. There you go.
Bruce taught him
This weekend
to nod. And,
yeah, I don't know if he knows that means yes.
She was so tense when she was teaching him this nodding that he's kind of like, he does this kind of like crazy nodding that...
Yeah. Give me the mouth.
As well as teaching him Makaton Sign Language, Steve and Perul are also encouraging Stian to use a visual communication system called PEX.
Where he was just going through the fridge and taking everything out and causing chaos, the fridge door is now shut, but he has these pictures, and he brings a picture to you. He asked me for Cocoa Pops ages ago. And what's lovely about that is you're getting the interaction, and he's now able to tell you what he wants. Here we go. That's changed our life, hasn't it, in a way? It has. It's kind of...
It's changed his life, hasn't
Well,
it? Because
changed
he
his
now
life.
feels...
It's empowering him again, you know, and he's able to ask for what he wants.
The improvement in Stian's communication skills has motivated Steve and Perul to find out what else can be done to help autistic children learn to interact with others. Their final visit is to Trinity College in Cambridge, where they are meeting one of the world's foremost authorities on autism, Professor Simon Baron-Cohen.
One view of the typical child is that they can figure out what other people are thinking and they can read other people's emotions, and that children with autism may have difficulties with what we call mind reading, being able to put themselves into the shoes of somebody else or try to imagine the world from another person's point of view.
You feel they can be taught to do this?
Yeah, I think children and adults can learn all sorts of things. There's no reason why they can't learn to read emotions. But it often, for some children it might need special education or, highly tailored methods.
Are you going to watch it with me? No. Yeah, you can. It'd be great fun. Let's press play.
A sample group of autistic children is testing a series of specially developed children's cartoons. Created by Professor Baron-Cohen's Autism Research Centre, these 15 animated films feature vehicles with human faces. In each 5-minute episode, the characters explore a different emotion, like happiness, anger, or sadness.
The idea really is to try and get children with autism to start looking more at faces, to learn about people, because for many children with autism this is the most difficult area. But to do so without them even realising that they're being taught effectively social skills. They think that they're watching a film about trains and tractors and little toy vehicles. But even without them realising it, they're learning to look at faces and think about other people's feelings.
How does Charlie feel?
A researcher from the Cambridge team is assessing whether after a month the children who've watched the transporters' films can recognise emotions better.
Thinking.
And we've got some very promising results, you know, which we find encouraging because it shows that even after 1 month you can see change, that children with autism are improving in their ability to recognise emotional expressions, which doesn't, to me, seem that surprising, because if you're exposed to a lot of the same material, you know, something's going to stick.
You might be able to learn the emotion as you see it, but it's the empathy bit. How would you empathise with it?
You know, you're right, you know, just because you can recognise the person's face, or you've learnt now, OK, this is what they look like when they're jealous, does that give you empathy?
Yes.
But, you know, in a way, we're just trying to break down what's actually quite a complicated skill into smaller steps, and recognition of other people's emotions is a first step. So this is for you, and I'll be very interested to know if he enjoys it.
We'll definitely keep in touch and let you know.
Good.
That, so
good.
It's the end of Steve and Parul's journey to meet the scientists researching into autism, and their experience has inspired Steve to use his drawings for a purpose.
I think there's a huge need for a very simple method of delivering information to people about autism. But also I think that there is a huge opportunity to produce some kind of comic book which explains in very, very simple terms some of the things that we've experienced ourselves about having an autistic child, but also some of the research which is going on, some of the conclusions which are now available. It's been so exciting to meet the scientists, people who are undertaking research at the moment that is really at the forefront of new discoveries. It's the beginning of a complete new understanding of the condition.
I found out much more about autism than I have over the last 2 years since Tian first lost his speech. I actually feel in the last 3 weeks as though we've got somewhere, that, OK, we've got an idea of what's going on with Stian. Families with children with autism are desperately wanting to cling on to hope, and I think that these scientists and the research they're doing bring that to us.